There's something strange about people who grew up in the 1970s. They don't panic the way we do. They don't need constant reassurance. They don't check their phones every 5 minutes to feel connected. And if you ask them how they manage it, most of them just shrug and say, I don't know, I just handle it. But there is a reason, a psychological reason. Their childhood built something into their brain that this generation is losing fast. And understanding what that is might just explain why the world feels so different now. If you're from the 70s, this is going to hit close to home. If you're not, you're about to understand them in a way you never have before. Picture this. It's a Saturday morning in 1976. You're 9 years old. You wake up, eat whatever cereal is in the cupboard, and then you just leave. No permission, no texting your location, no be safe honey helicopter parents hovering over you. You grab your bike, you meet your friends, and you disappear for hours. Maybe you go to the creek. Maybe you build something in the woods. Maybe you ride to the store 3 miles away and spend your allowance on candy. And here's the crazy part. Your parents have absolutely no idea where you are. And they're not worried, because that was just normal. Now, psychologically, this did something massive to the 70s brain. It taught them self-reliance at a level we don't see anymore. Not the kind you learn in a self-help book. The kind you live because there's no other option. You fall off your bike and scrape your knee. You handle it. You get lost trying to find your way home. You figure it out. You have a problem with another kid. You solve it yourself. There was no parent to call, no GPS to rescue you. No adults rushing in to fix everything, just you, your brain, your instincts. And that created something powerful, a deep internal confidence that says, whatever happens, I'll figure it out. That's not arrogance. That's survival wiring. People from the 70s don't wait for permission to act. They don't freeze when something goes wrong. Their first instinct isn't, who can help me? It's, what can I do? And even now, decades later, that psychology is still there. Hardwired, unshakable. Here's something most people don't realize. The 70s was quiet. No phones buzzing. No notifications. No constant stream of information flowing into your brain every second of the day. If you wanted to know something, you had to go to the library and look it up. If you wanted to talk to your friend, you had to call their house and hope they were home. And if there was nothing to do, you just sat there, and your brain had no choice but to entertain itself. You'd stare out the window and daydream. You'd make up entire stories in your head. You'd take something apart just to see how it worked. Boredom wasn't a problem to fix. It was just part of life. And psychologically, that silence did something incredible. It taught their brains to think, to imagine, to create from nothing. Compare that to now. Kids today, hell, adults today, can't sit in silence for 5 minutes without reaching for their phone. The second there's a gap, a moment of nothingness, the brain panics. I need stimulation. I need something, anything. But people from the 70s, they're comfortable with silence, with stillness, with their own thoughts. Because their brains were trained to generate entertainment, not just consume it. That's why they can sit and read a book for hours. That's why they can have a conversation without checking their phone. That's why they don't need constant validation or distraction. Their brain learned to be enough, all by itself. Let me tell you something that sounds insane today. In the 70s, kids played in ways that would get parents arrested now. They built tree forts 30 feet off the ground with no safety equipment. They rode bikes without helmets. They played with fireworks, BB guns, and chemistry sets that could literally blow up. They swam in rivers without lifeguards. They explored abandoned buildings. They did things that, looking back, were genuinely dangerous. And you know what? Some kids got hurt. That's just the truth. But here's the psychological effect. It taught them risk assessment in real time. Their brain learned, okay, if I climb this high, I might fall. If I go this fast, I might crash. If I do this, there's a consequence. And they learned it through experience, not through warnings, not through bubble-wrapped safety measures, through actual trial and error. That's why people from the 70s aren't afraid of much. Not because they're reckless, but because they've already calibrated risk in their brain. They know what's actually dangerous and what's just uncomfortable. They don't catastrophize. They don't spiral into worst-case scenarios over every little thing. Meanwhile, we've raised a generation that's terrified of everything because they've been protected from everything. Kids today wear knee pads to ride a scooter. They need permission slips to go on a field trip. They have parents tracking their every move. And psychologically, what does that teach? The world is dangerous. You can't handle it. You need protection. So when something does go wrong, when they face real stress, real conflict, real failure, they break. Because their brain was never trained to handle it. 70s kids, they got hurt, got back up, and kept going. That's just what you did. And that resilience is still in them. You can see it in how they handle problems, how they face challenges, how they don't fall apart when life gets hard. Here's something nobody talks about anymore. Discipline in the 70s was real. I'm not saying it was always right. I'm not glorifying it. But it was a different world. If you talked back to your parents, there were consequences. If you disrespected a teacher, you got sent to the principal, and your parents backed the school, not you. If you screwed up, you faced it. No negotiating, no explaining your feelings, no therapy session about why you acted out. You just dealt with it. And psychologically, this created a very clear understanding of boundaries. You learned that actions have consequences, that respect isn't optional, that authority figures aren't your friends, they're in charge, and you listen. Now compare that to today. Parents negotiate with 5-year-olds. Teachers can't discipline students without parents threatening lawsuits. Kids grow up thinking every rule is up for debate. And what does that create? Adults who struggle with authority, who don't understand hierarchy, who think their opinion matters equally in every situation, even when they have no expertise. People from the 70s don't have that problem. They understand structure. They respect experience. They know when to speak and when to listen. Not because they're obedient robots, but because their brain was wired to understand. Some things aren't negotiable. Some people know more than you. And that's okay. That doesn't make them weak. It makes them adaptable. They can work under bosses they don't like. They can follow rules they don't agree with. They can function in systems they didn't design. Because they learned early, the world doesn't revolve around you. And that's not a bad thing. That's just reality. Here's the hardest part about being from the 70s. You're stuck between two completely different realities. You remember a world without technology, without social media, without constant connection. But you also live in this world, the modern one, the digital one. And psychologically, that's exhausting. You learn to be independent, but now the world demands you be collaborative. You learn to be direct, but now everyone expects you to be sensitive about everything. You learn to handle things yourself, but now people think that makes you emotionally unavailable. You're fluent in 2 languages that don't translate, and younger generations don't get it. They look at 70s people and think they're old-fashioned or out of touch. But they're not. They're just carrying the psychology of a different time. A time when people didn't need constant stimulation to feel alive. A time when friendships were real because they required actual effort. A time when you learned to be strong because nobody was coming to save you. And here's the thing. They're not trying to be difficult. They're not refusing to adapt. They're just tired. Tired of explaining why they don't need their phone at dinner. Tired of being told they're not vulnerable enough. Tired of watching the world lose its mind over things that to them seem small. Because they've lived through harder. And they did it without posting about it. So here's what I want you to understand. People who grew up in the 1970s aren't better than you. They're not tougher. They're not superior. They're just different. They carry a psychology built by freedom, silence, danger, and real responsibility. And that psychology doesn't fit neatly into the modern world. They don't need what we need. They don't fear what we fear. They don't break the way we break. Not because they're special, but because their childhood gave them tools we're not teaching anymore. Self-reliance, resilience, respect, quiet strength. And maybe, just maybe, we should be asking ourselves, what are we teaching instead? Because this generation, the one raised on screens and safety and constant validation, they're struggling. Anxiety is through the roof, depression is everywhere. People can't handle discomfort, can't sit in silence, can't solve problems without Googling the answer. And I'm not blaming them. They were raised in a different system. But maybe there's something to learn from the 70s. Not everything. Not the harshness, not the neglect, not the lack of emotional awareness. But the core idea: you are capable. The world is tough, but you can handle it. Maybe that's what we're missing. So let me ask you this. Are you from the 70s or after? And either way, what do you think we lost? What do you think we gained? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your story, not for the algorithm, not for engagement, but because I genuinely think this conversation matters. If this made you think, smash that subscribe button. We're going deep on psychology and culture every single week. And if you've got someone from the 70s in your life, your parents, your boss, your friend, send them this video. Let them know you're not outdated, you're not stubborn, you're not out of touch, you're just built different. And in a world that's losing its mind, that's exactly what we need. And that still means something.